Hi guys. I thought it would be easier if I just explain this to you, through a video instead of trying to type out the rule, because this comma rule is by far the most complicated one that we've done so far. Um, Basically, what you're gonna do today is use commas around non-essential appositives. That probably makes no sense to you at this point in time. Which is why I wanted to take a second to thoroughly explain it. So basically what this means is when you take a break in the middle or the end or sometimes even at the beginning of a sentence to give extra information about the noun in the sentence, you need to put a comma around it or put two commas around it, but only when the information isn't necessary to the sentence. Okay, so the definition is super confusing and complicated. Obviously, you can look at this slide while you're practicing to review, but it's probably better if I just give you the actual examples. So let's take, for example, the sentence down here. So you have English 2, the class, is the noun in this sentence. So I gave some extra information about it. English 2, comma, a required class at WHS, comma, is taught by Miss Keene. Now, if you took out a required class at WHS, the rest of the sentence still makes perfect sense. So that's why it's called non-essential. It's not necessary to the sentence, and that's why we put commas around it. Okay, so let me show you another example. Robbie, comma, a hot-tempered tennis player, comma, charged the umpire and tried to crack the poor man's skull with a racket. You could take out a hot-tempered tennis player. I mean, it's giving more information about Robbie, but without it, you still understand what's going on. So you put commas around it. Now, sometimes the appositives come at the beginning of the sentence. We sort of talked about that last time, like an introductory clause that you'd put a comma after. But they can also come at the end. So you have upset by the bad call. The crowd cheered Robbie, comma, a hot-tempered tennis player who charged the umpire and tried to crack the poor man's skull with a racket. So you could take that out, and it still makes sense. Upset by the bad call, the crowd cheered Robbie. You still understand what's going on. So just to be even more clear about this, I showed you at two examples at the bottom here of the same type of sentence, but a non-essential appositive versus an essential one. So non-essential, Harper Lee, who just recently died, wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. You don't need to know that she just recently died to know that she wrote the book. Now, the reverse, the author, Harper Lee, wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. That's still an appositive because Harper Lee is describing who the author is. But if you took Harper Lee out of the sentence, it would just say the author wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. And that doesn't work because which author was it? There's a million authors in the world. So without her name, the sentence is unclear. So I hope that makes sense to you. There's one final catch that I want to talk about, and that's this. Anytime, now this technically isn't an appositive, but it follows the same rules. Anytime you guys have a break in the middle of your sentence to add a little extra fluff kind of, you need to put commas around it. So I gave you some examples at the bottom here, and hopefully you'll get the hang of it and understand when you would do something like this. So you have, and we didn't have much, comma, if any, comma, support. And it was only brought up to me briefly, comma, at best. And, comma, for what it's worth, comma, I still gave my best effort. So I hope you're kind of getting the vibe of when you would stop and put commas around your little extra fluff or your extra phrases. This rule is definitely more complicated, so just do your best when you practice today. Over the weekend, I'm going to take a look at the last 3 entries that you wrote and make sure that you're using these three comma rules right before we move on to anything else. So today, you're going to write with comma rule number 1, so putting a comma in a conjunction with 2 complete sentences. Comma number 2, having an introductory clause or phrase or word with a comma after it. And then this rule, number 3, which is putting commas around non-essential appositives. So use each of these rules once, make sure you highlight them, and you will be all good to go. You can, once again, send me an email if you have any questions or if you're confused, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can, and hopefully we can clear up, any additional questions that you have. All right, be good for this up, and I will see you guys next week.